What's up, everyone? Aaron Schatz here, and it's time for another edition of Tech Talk with Aaron Smart Home Edition, Volume 4. I got some more comments about the ZB Mini, this guy right here. I bought some new stuff. I want to go over them with you, and I want to give you my rundown of the other stuff that I bought real quick before we get into something much, much larger in the future. To start off, just a reminder that I mentioned that you could use the ZB Mini, the Sonoff ZBMINI relay switch, with a regular single pole switch, right? And the only caveat is that it won't potentially have the same state. So for instance, if the switch is turned on and the light turns on, and then I go to the habitat and turn it off, or it turns off via automation, it's not going to be in the same state as the switch. So the switch says it's on, but the light is off. So that's the start. But there is something interesting that I found. I know most of you have garbage disposals, and a lot of you actually have momentary switches for those garbage disposals, right? The ones where you push and it actually just jumps back. It's called a momentary switch. I actually went to Home Depot, couldn't find one easily. I was looking through the electrical aisle, but I did find one on Amazon, and it's interestingly produced by a company called Zeus, Z-O-O-Z, which makes a lot of Z-Wave stuff, and I'm really not going into Z-Wave right now. And they are a very, very large manufacturer for Z-Wave. They're very well known. But this thing right here is a Zeus momentary switch. Regular momentary switch, not smart at all. If I remember how my other smart switches work, like the Kasa ones or the like, it was always you pushed down here to turn it off or on. So this switch, again, it's just a regular momentary switch. It's not smart at all. I mounted it upside down, specifically because it mimics that functionality. And how does this work? Well, I wired the ZB Mini into the switch as you would just a normal switch. And watch this. I'll let that sink in for a second. There's plenty of room in the actual circuit box to stuff all this stuff in there. So I'm not concerned about the actual space that this thing takes up because it's not really a problem. Here's the interesting part though. This switch was just under $10. This thing was, it's $14 if you buy just one of them. If you buy a 4-pack, it turns to $10. So you can make a smart, capable switch just with this stuff. So if you spend the money to get this momentary switch, you basically can mimic the old style Kasa switches or the other smart switches for the like Wi-Fi ones without a problem. The interesting thing about ZigBee switches like the Brighton one here or the Novelli one right here is they actually have independent off and on. And I think that's really interesting. I like this. But these are pretty expensive, and this thing is not that expensive. The other thing that you should be considerate of, is it actually worth spending the extra money on this switch versus just this? Sure, it might get out of sync, but in reality, does it actually matter? That's the question you have to ask yourself. In this case, too, there is some weirdness about the switch, too. So let's just say that you hold it down, right? I'll show you what happens. So I'm going to hold this down. Now I'm going to release it. Now that's a problem, right? That's not what it's supposed to do. The reason that it doesn't work the way it's supposed to is because this doesn't have an option to say like, hey, I attach this to a momentary switch. So it does not support a momentary switch via the documentation or the manufacturer's website. So I just want to make that very clear. I think the reason this thing works like this is because it's so fast that it doesn't have time to register that like there was multiple changes, so it doesn't do an off and on. If you hold it down, it recognizes a state change, turns the light on, then you release it, it recognizes another state change and turns it off. But if you do it quickly, it just works. And I actually think this is a pretty reasonable analog to an actual smart switch that's built in altogether. I'm actually going to put this in my house. I think this is absolutely fine for the intended purpose. Somebody's going to go to the switch and be like, I'm understanding that this turns it off and turns it on. It's pretty obvious when you see it, just like the other smart switches that I had previously. I'm making this because it's basically an inexpensive way to mimic how the other smart switches work. Again, look at this. It just works. I have no idea if this is going to be the case with other ZB Minis because this may or may not work. Watch this if I hold it down a little bit. That's not the way it's supposed to work. But there you go. I just wanted to report that to you. I'm also going to give you a sneak preview of other stuff too. I've got a couple of sensors from Sonoff as well. I also got this thing I found on Amazon too. It's crazy. It's got It's got like a wireless remote and a dimming, it's a dimming smart switch. With the wireless remote, it basically had like a knockoff of the Lutron, which is a very nice thing, except it requires a separate hub. But this is a knockoff of the Lutron, and let me see if I can show you the, I'll show you the remote, which is basically mimics the faceplate. But it was cheap. It was like $25 or so. And if this works, I'm going to be shocked if it works. But if it works, see, this thing comes right out. So I can get it out. Nice little remote right here. If this thing works, $25 is going to be great. The caveat that I'm going to tell you is support. So what I mean by that is, let me put this down here. I'll put this over here. You have GE, big company, offers good support. Sonoff has been in the market for a long time. I see a lot of positive reviews. That's really good. Innovelli, a smaller company, also offers great support. I looked at their community. I backed one of their new products that's coming out that I'm very interested in. This was from a unknown company. Let me see if they even say it. It's called Humptum, Humpttom. I've never heard of them, and I have no idea if this thing is going to work for a day, a week, or whatever. But that's why I'm doing this stuff, so I can tell you about the findings. That's really it. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about what I found more interesting about the ZB Mini with this momentary switch, which I actually think is really cool. I do. I think it's really cool. Again, I'm going to install this and then see how people react to it as well. I'm going to try this out later, give you a full rundown of this, at least my first impressions. And then I've got these sensors to go over. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff that we're going to do in the future. I'm going to do a rundown of all these switches that I actually have here because they all have pluses and minuses. So stick with us, hit that subscribe button, and if you have a smart home and you've got some tips and tricks, let me know in the comments. Love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.